All right, good morning. So I called this little mini series from blueprint to action because what I wanted to do was take the work that we've been doing in the business planning clinic workshop and then sort of elaborate on some of the key components of it, as well as talk about some of the things that I don't actually teach live in the class. And so next week, I'm going to be expounding on my P&L statement spreadsheet or on the next session. So tune in for that if you'd like to take a deeper dive into the P&L and what that looks like. And as usual, I've tried to make this so simple that you can use it. And I would say this, even if you use QuickBooks or FreshBooks or you have an accountant, tune in to that because I'll spend about 20 minutes going through it and then we'll go back to Q&A and things like that. But tune in even if you have someone else doing it, because I think it's going to help in a visual way, help you kind of understand exactly what goes into understanding what is the profit or the loss of your business. And if you're a real estate professional, there are probably some months out of the year that you're operating at a profit, sometimes a really nice profit. And there are probably some months that you're operating at a loss. And that's inevitable in real estate simply because there are some expenses for you guys that come due in a lump, like your dues or your MLS dues, your local board dues, or your NAR dues, and then your MLS fees come due like in a chunk. So those things are they're sort of standard throughout the year, and so you're going to have higher expenses. It's not like your expenses are even throughout the year. And then so that your income, because it's not consistent, you don't get a paycheck, right? If you have a closing or multiple closings, that's going to be a month that, despite the expenses that come in, you're probably operating at a profit. And then there's just some months inevitably you'll be operating at a loss. What we want to get is an annualized view of what your business looks like. And if you start to use the tools, and I want to take a quick peek today at my sales volume and pipeline report, if you begin to use that tool consistently, excuse me, like my clients do, you'll be able to tell what your seasonality typically is. And so if, for example, you discover that Decembers are typically a slow month for you, and also that in December, you've got your end of the year MLS or board dues, whatever comes due in December, so that you're operating at a delta in December, then we just need to go back 90 days and make sure that in October, you don't just sit around and eat Halloween candy all month, but you actually get out and do some work so that you don't have to experience that delta in December. So there's ways to do that. And if you begin to use that tool successfully, you'll start to see what is my own seasonality. There is a seasonality in real estate. Most of you probably know what that is. What times of the year are busier for realtors? What times are slower? Based on a couple of factors. One is what you do because of what's going on in life or in your life. And one is what the consumer does. And so you've got to be able to marry those together to determine what am I willing to tolerate in my business. And if I can't take that slowdown in December, then I got to back up and do it. If I'm typically slow in January, February, March, let's say, it's because I didn't do any work in December. Because it's what you do 90 days prior that's going to determine what you've got under contract 90 days in the future. So this is what that tool is about. We'll dive into that in a minute. But what I did want to start with today is just, sort of a little bit of a mind shift, if you will. And I want to talk to you about the law of trade-offs. In John Maxwell's book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, the law of trade-offs says you have to give up to grow up. You have to give up to grow up. And so we all know that. We've made trade-offs throughout our lives in one way or another in pretty much every area of our lives. And so we can all think of examples of things that we gave up in order to have that opportunity to grow up. And so the truth is, we just have to look and see in terms of our business for 2025 and beyond, what are the things that you're willing to give up in order to grow to that next level. Viktor Frankl, you guys have probably heard me talk about him multiple times. He was a survivor of the Holocaust. And Viktor Frankl lived through Auschwitz and Dachau and a number of concentration camps. But he says that when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. And at the time of this that we're talking right now, we all understand that. We're in a situation that, for the most part, we are incapable of changing what's out there. I spoke about this at the business planning clinic in length, because the fact is, we don't get what we want. We get what we choose. We don't get the life that's actually happening to us. We get the meaning that we make out of that. We get the decisions that we make around that. And so right now, we can't change what's happening in Washington. We can't change what's happening at the Federal Reserve. We can't change what's happening, outside of ourselves in the industry with the changes through the National Association of Realtors and those lawsuits. Those are just things that we can't change. And so the only thing we can change is ourselves. And that becomes our challenge for next year. And so I would ask you, what is something that you know you need to give up right now in order to grow up for next year and beyond? Okay. So, if we want something we don't currently have, we have to probably do something we haven't done, right? If I want something new, I've got to change me. So John Maxwell says in his book, The 15 Invaluable Laws of Growth, in light of Law 11, which is the law of trade-offs, he says, I determined that while others may lead timid lives, I would not. While others might see themselves as victims, I would not. While others leave their future in someone else's hands, I will not. While others simply go through life, I will grow through it. This is my choice, and I will surrender it to no one, to no one. And so, I'm just going to ask you guys to think for a moment about what is the sacrifice that you know you need to make. That maybe it's a short-term comfort. Maybe it's just something that is in your comfort zone. Maybe it's a habit you've gotten into. Maybe it's a mindset that you have about yourself or about business. What is something that you need to give up right now in order to achieve the goals that you've set yourself for next year? And we could be talking about your business goals, your personal goals, your health goals, your goals for your relationships, your financial goals, whatever area of life that you're focused on. What is something that you know right now you got to give it up if you want to get to the next level? And I want you to take a moment and write that down, because it's really, really important for us to identify. Because if you were with me in the business planning clinic, or if you attended virtually through, all of those sessions are, I think it's broken down into 9 sessions on the Mighty Network. They're all there for you to go back and review again and again. They're pretty clearly labeled what they are. So if you get to the budget plan and you're like, I really don't understand this, go back and watch that video again. But if you've done that with me, or even if you haven't, you've set some goals for yourself for next year. What do you need to give up in order to grow up? What's the trade-off that you know you need to make? Because this is what's going to open the door for growth. So does everybody have something that like I got to give this up? I got to give this up, right? For some people, it is doom scrolling on their social media feed, right? They just have to give it up. That's something that I had to give up, because even though I'm not on social media, I have an app where I go to get my news. And guess what, guys? It's the news I don't want to hear it because it's terrible, but it's the perspective that I identify with. So of course it's doom scrolling, because it's just feeding into my mind, which I've already made up my mind. Why do I need to keep getting that reinforced? But it was like I was getting a little dopamine hit, because I would read something that would just tick me off. Like, why would we intentionally do this? Well, there's a really good reason that that happens from a neuroscience perspective. Because when people feel uncertain, which, many people feel uncertain right now. Our future seems to be at best uncertain, especially in this country. But no matter what your perspective is, there's this deep angst, if you will. And so when people feel uncertain, their number one need becomes certainty. And the quickest way to get to certainty is to get pissed off. Because when we get angry, we narrow our focus. We get laser focused on what's right in front of us. And so all of the distractions seem to fall away as we get focused, preparing to fight or flee, right? Think about that. If we're going to fight the bad guy or run away to save ourselves, we need all of our energy focused narrowly. That's what anger does. So anger gives us a feeling of certainty because the chemicals that are raging through our body, the hormones of cortisol and adrenaline. And so if we're doom scrolling in a sick, twisted way, we're releasing those chemicals into our bloodstream, into our bodies, into our brain, and we're getting that feeling of certainty. So believe it or not, it feels good. So I have to give that up. That's a trade-off I had to make, even though what it gave me was a physiological sensation of I'm right and they're wrong. Is anybody besides me guilty of this? No matter what side you're on, you think your side is the right side. Tony Robbins says, no matter how thin you slice it, there's always two sides. And so I had to give up the comfort, sickly, because how could that be comforting to get ticked off? But I understand what's happening in my body. And so I said, I got to give that up in order to grow up. Because wallowing in my own self-righteous indignation is really not going to be helpful for me, for the people I serve, for my family, for my community, for anybody, right? So what is it that you need to give up in order to grow up? For some people, it's social media. For some people, it's television. For some people, it's, doing certain things in excess. For some people, it's, say it's staying home on the sofa, like whatever it might be. For some people, it's giving up this belief that I can't make a phone call, or I don't know what to say to people, or nobody wants to actually talk to their realtor on the phone, whatever. If you did the business planning clinic with me, we talked about these phone calls. These phone calls are meant to develop relationships, to connect you with people, not to sell them anything. That's what your marketing efforts do. Your emails, your newsletters, your postcards, whatever you're sending out, those things are there to sell you as a realtor. Your phone calls are meant to connect you with people. So for some people, they may need to give up this false belief that they're not a salesperson and they can't telemarket because no one's asking you to do that, but you are a salesperson. So what is it? What is it? Does everybody have something? Just give me kind of a virtual show of hands here. You got something you need to give up next year. Okay, I got some hands up. Now, my next question around that is, what's holding you back? What's holding you back? What's keeping you from making that trade-off? Because we want to be strategic in how we do these trade-offs. You're not going to give up everything that you do. But I want you to focus on one thing. And I want you to ask yourself, like, what's holding me back? Okay, I'll use my example again. What was holding me back? Because I would get away from it and then I'd find myself, just while I'm doing something else, checking that feed there. What was holding me back was this idea that I won't know what's happening if I don't stay checked in, which is ridiculous. What does it matter what's happening? They're out polling, they're out stumping, they're out doing what they're doing. And honestly, there's been a lot of crazy things that have happened in the world that I didn't even know had happened. So like, what good did it do me to even know that? But I kind of had this thought, like I need to stay plugged in because I don't want to miss something. That's insane. That's what was holding me back. And what I had to realize for myself was things are happening right now all over this planet that I don't know anything about. The only thing that I should be focused on is what's going on right here, the things that I can control. So what's holding you back? Are you willing to pay the price to give up something, whether it's just a habit or a comfort or a mindset or something that you've been doing in order for you to get to that next level? Because you got to decide if you are willing to pay that price, because every trade-off has a price. Does that make sense? Is anybody open to sharing, sort of what's going on with you regarding this particular topic? I'm open to hearing what your thoughts are, or if you just want some accountability of something you need to give up so that next year you can grow up or go up.
I mean, for me, the thing that I said I need to give up is to quit letting all the distractions keep me from doing what's the most important thing is in our business.
Yeah, yeah. Distractions. So, what I'm going to ask you to do, Alice, is just take a moment this morning, maybe after we're done, and just write them down. What are the distractions? Like, we need to identify them, we need to name them so we'll know when they show up. Right. I had a client call yesterday, and this person talked about needing more discipline. And I said, what gets in the way of you doing the thing you need to do? So this example was I knew it was time to sit down and make my calls. And so I decided to do the dishes. And so what we discussed was, and this is a particularly female quality that our household seems to speak to us, right? Like the laundry is calling from the laundry room. We're dirty. You need to wash us. The dishes holler from the sink. Hey, look at all of us sitting here. The throw pillows that are disarrayed on the sofa or the bed are hollering for you to come. Is hollering a word anywhere but in the South? I don't know. Yelling would be another word. They're yelling, please come and straighten us, right? I mean, there's a million distractions around the house. I have doors on my office here at home, but they're French doors, so they're glass. So I can look out right now. Luckily, everything in my view is neat and tidy. But I'm guilty as the next person. So if that's the case for you, if you're at your office and you look and there's a mess on the desk, that could be a distraction that says, straighten me up first. File me. Papers are like, file me away somewhere so that your desk will be clean when you make your calls, right? So I'm going to ask you guys to sit down and think about, look around you and decide what is getting in the way. What are those distractions? Write them down, name them so that you can start to identify what's coming up, right? So for my client, it's like if the dishes are a distraction, then you either have to make sure they're done before you start your day or before you go to bed, right? Or you have to close the door. But you've got to identify that's a potential distraction. So whatever those distractions are for you, write them down. And the list can be exhaustive because you need to know what they are. And then you need to, make some decisions around that. Does that make sense? Yeah. I mean,
It totally does.
yeah, we got to be aware of what those little evil demons are that are lurking around the corner, ready to derail us. So if you go back to the book, The One Thing that Gary Keller and Jay Papasan wrote, they talk about when you're getting ready to do your one thing, you've got to build a bunker. Build a bunker, okay? Which means if it's in your office, you've got to make sure that everything is the way you need it to be, that you've got some doors that you can close, whatever it might be. If you're in an office at work, maybe you need to lock the door. I mean, agents are horrible when they just see do not enter, I'm doing my one thing, and they're like, you got a minute? It's like, what? I know you're doing lead gen. I really need your help, right? So we have to build a bunker. Step two is store provisions. Okay, it's a military analogy, but like if you need your water, get your water. You need your coffee, get your coffee. You need your notebook, have your notebook. Whatever it is, have it all ready so that you don't have to get up and leave your office to go get more coffee. Like honestly, you would have everything but a potty nearby. So because the minute I leave my office, something in my house is going to be like, "Hey, don't you want to make another pot of tea or whatever?" Right? Something in my house, if that's my distraction, is going to call for me. Same thing at the office. And so that's store provisions. Step three is sweep for minds. Sweep for minds, right? You got to make sure there's nothing that's going to show up. If you know you want to go to your office and make your calls at a certain time on certain days, and you know your bestie is also there at the same time, or there's some kind of a meeting or something going on that's going to make you want to go pop your head in and check it out. Like you got to plan for those things. For me, I could not do my lead gen at the office when I was a realtor because I'm a high eye on the disc. I would much rather talk to you guys than do anything that requires me to have to step outside of my comfort zone. So I had to do my lead gen at home. And if I was working from home, I had to make sure I did my lead gen in a very specific place. I did it at my kitchen counter. So I had to make sure that my kitchen was stocked and clean and there were no distractions, but I had to stand up because if I sat down, I got a little too comfortable. I might start checking some other things. And by the way, my desk is where all of my work stuff was. And so there was inevitably going to be a file that needed me to do something with it. Okay. So sweep for minds. And then lastly, enlist support. Enlist support. So make sure that your friends and family know that Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 9 to 11, I'm just making up times, whatever your times are. They can't bother you. They can't text you. They can't call you. They can't show up. They can't ask. They can't schedule an appointment. None of those things can happen. So many people that are in real estate, myself included when I was a realtor, because it wasn't a real job, especially if there was someone else at home that had a real job where they had to be a certain place at a certain time, it fell on me to get the kids if it was an early school day or take them to the doctor or pick up the dry cleaning or pick up prescriptions or whatever because I had that flexible schedule. And so I had the same experience that many of you probably have, where it's like, well, you can do these things because you're available during the day. Even with your team, they're scheduling closings right in the middle of the time that you would be doing lead gen. I tell my clients this all the time. Don't schedule anything during the time that we have our call. It's the same day, same time each week. It should be the most important appointment you have. So you've got to enlist support of the people in your life to make sure that they know what you're doing at this particular time. And as you guys have heard me say in the business planning clinic, you don't need to block off 3 hours a day, 5 days a week, unless you're building a millionaire real estate business, in which case, yeah, that's what you're doing. But guess what? That's pretty much all you're doing besides running your team is you're doing your lead gen. But for most agents that are solo or have a small team, you need to block off 90 minutes a day, about 3 to 4 days a week. Now, the good news is from going back to neuroscience, what we know is that even you can focus for 90 minutes. All of us can. I mean, we are wired. I would presume there are some people who have some wiring in their brain that may be a little bit different, but most people can focus for 90 minutes. But that's about all you can focus. So that's why I tell you, set a 90-minute time block to do your one thing and do that 3 or 4 times a week, which means if you're scheduling 90 minutes to do your most important work, let's just say 4 times a week, that is an hour and a half. That's what is that? 3 hours? No. What, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's 6 hours. 6 hours out of the week, which means you have about 34 other hours to do all the other stuff. Presumably if you're working 40 hours. Now, if you're currently working more than 40 hours, you know what's happening, right? You're not taking 6 hours to do your one thing. So that's why you have to work all the other hours. If you were taking your 6 hours to do your one thing, you would have the business that would enable you to hire a transaction coordinator and then ultimately hire an assistant so that you could have some of that time back. So if you're working all the hours, I know it's because you're not generating sufficient number of leads to actually get you to the place where you can scale your business. I mean, that's just kind of how it goes. So I hope that's helpful. This is the law of trade-offs at its finest. You got to give up to go up. You got to give up to grow up. You got to make a sacrifice now to get what you want tomorrow. You got to understand it's got to be a strategic trade-off. You've got to have someone who can hold you accountable to that. Find someone that you can trust. I have a friend right now. I said, if you hear me mention politics, you have permission to say, what would Jesus have you say right now? Because usually if I start talking about politics, the next thing that comes out of my mouth is not very kind. And that's not who I want to be. So she has my permission to call me to the carpet and challenge me to change direction. So who do you trust in your life that you can say, look, I just want to be accountable to you for this trade-off that I'm making. And if you see me indulging in this thing, or you know that I've gone to this thing, and so I didn't do something that I was moving towards that was more important, you have my permission to lovingly call me out. Make sense? All right, so I'm going to share my screen because I want to walk you guys through this tool that I created a long time ago. Because it's a valuable tool. All of my clients use it, and it's been invaluable for them over the years, and I think it will be helpful to you as well. So it is in the business planning clinic folder that I shared with you if you've attended my business planning clinic. And if you haven't, and you'd like to have this tool, you need to pop that in the chat and give me your email address, and I'll make sure you get it. But this is the sales volume and pipeline reports. So no doubt your whatever company you're with has some sort of a CRM that tracks your production, but I promise you, or I'd be willing to bet, it probably doesn't do it as concisely and as easily as this does. Plus, you can go to this report if you create this, and for those of you who don't know, from my Google Drive, you have no edit capabilities. Of course, this is my original. So you'll just click on File, Make a Copy, and then here, you'll click on this, and you'll put this in your own Google Drive, right? You'll select that, you'll have your own copy, and then you can do whatever you want with it. But the way that this works, I'm going to start with the pipeline tab first. Because if you did the economic plan with me, you'll know that I'm asking you for a lot of different conversion rates and a lot of different numbers that you may not have had access to. If you start to use this tool, either immediately, and I would say immediately, I don't know that it would be helpful for you to go all the way back to January 1, but for sure by January 1 of next year, you'll be off to the races. If you use it, then when you do the business planning clinic again next year, you'll have all the numbers that you need. So let's just take a look at the pipeline. There's 2 tabs here at the bottom. In the pipeline, we're going to track a number of things. The minute you get a lead, you want to add them to your pipeline report. So you can see my little examples here. We've got Betsy buyer and Sandy and Sam seller buyer, Scott someday buyer, and Susan sell right now, okay? And so as you put them in, you want to categorize whether they're sellers or buyers. Now you'll notice that Sandy and Sam are on here twice because that's 2 separate transactions. And they may not happen at the same time, so I need to track them separately. So this will help me determine as the year goes on what percentage of my leads are coming from buyers and sellers. Now, the next thing here is the source. I need to know, where am I getting my business, right? I need to know where that business is coming from. We talked about lead sources in the business planning clinic, and I had you guys look at a very extensive list. And of course, we came back to decide that most of your leads are probably going to come from your sphere, whether they're referred by your sphere or a past client, but someone that you're in relationship. And we know that because most transactions are done by agents with someone that they're somehow connected to. But then it could be open house, it could be farming, it could be an internet lead, it could be a listing lead, it could be a for sale by owner, it could be an expired. But there's probably not more categories than that. Or agent referral, I left that out. Okay, then the next column is just the next step. What do I need to do next with these people? And then the date of last contact. This is so important because oftentimes what happens with an agent is they get a lead, they maybe make contact with the person. The person says, well, we're getting some things done around the house, and once we get that done, we'll be ready. We'll call you. That's probably going to be about 3 or 4 months from now. And so agents just think, well, I guess I'll wait 3 or 4 months. And that's a huge mistake because you wait 3 or 4 months, and by now they've already run into somebody at the office who says, hey, my sister-in-law is a realtor. You should call her. Or they wandered into an open house to get some ideas of paint colors. I'm sorry, a new home development to get some idea of paint colors. And they decide to buy a house in that neighborhood. And now that listing goes to somebody else. Or they wander into an open house just to see what is going on in their neighborhood, and that agent gets them. It happens all the time, and it may have happened to you in the past, but we want to make sure that we're staying in touch with people appropriately. So you'll come up with your own standards about what that looks like. I always tell my clients, if they're doing something in the next 30 days, you're probably talking to them on a minimum once a week. If they're going to do something in 30 to 60 days, it may be every other week. If it's 60 to 90 days, it may be once every 2 or 3 weeks. If it's, 90 to 120 days, it may be once a month. If they're more than 120 days out, maybe for you it's every other month. I don't know what it is. You'll decide the frequency, but this will keep you on track to make sure you don't lose touch with them.
And can I
Yes.
ask a question? Kind of a silly question, but on your next steps, you're updating that everywhere, every time you talk to them. Is there anywhere that should be these notes should be kept so that you kind of have a running tab of what you're doing with this person?
So that's a good question. For me as an agent, I just needed to know what was next, and I'll give you a little thing of what I did. I used that lead sheet. The seller and buyer lead sheets are in the folder here. I used it religiously, and I'm a paper person. So I even think if I was an agent now, I mean, I was an agent, when you chiseled on a stone tablet. So, but I even think if I was an agent now, I would keep that paper because every Friday I took those lead sheets out as I went through this online, and I would write down the notes and then I would just type in the next step. And the reason that I wanted this concise is because I had a coach, of course, as well. And I wanted to be able to report out to my coach what I was doing. But I had that paper where I kind of had those notes. And what I did was after the transaction closed, I scanned that lead sheet with all my notes on it, and I stored it in DocuSign or Dot Loop, whatever we had. I don't even remember. I stored it in the loop. Oh, it must have been a dot loop. I stored it in the loop, so I had it forever. But for you, if it's important for you to have that running tab, you could keep it in the notes section of your CRM, right? For some people that are more tech savvy than I am, there's a way to create a little drop down, if you will, where you could have a longer section of notes. That's beyond my skill set in terms of a spreadsheet. So I don't know, whatever you think you might need, if it's important for you to have that. I did because I used that lead sheet to scribble notes. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. Yeah, that makes total sense.
But for my clients to report to me, I don't need the whole history. I need to know what's next. I don't care what you talked to them about 10 weeks ago. I need to know what's next because sometimes people will write, wait on them to call the lender. And I'm like, that's not a step. Waiting is not a step. We have to take action. So then maybe what you need to do is follow up with the lender on Friday to make sure they connected. I'm not waiting. What is this waiting? That's not action. That's passive. I need action steps. So for my clients, I'm looking to see, Okay, well, I would ask them, if you were my client, I would say, well, when's the house going to be painted, Alice? You would say, I don't know. Then I would say, well, that's your action step is to reach out to them and say, when is the house going to be painted? I'm going to follow up with you that following Monday. Does that make sense? Like I'm putting you back in the driver's seat.
It
Okay.
does.
Okay. Time frame is very important. When's this going to happen? Q1, March, April? Don't put 90 days or 60 days because 60 days from when? From the first time you talk to them, from the last time you talk to them, get as specific as possible, right? So let's just say this was your pipeline at the beginning of January. I would say you got nothing going on this month, right? You don't have anything happening in January or February. So that tells me you didn't do anything in December, but let's just go for the sake of this. I would say, what can you do in January that may put something in your pipeline for February? Okay. And then we could strategize on what do I need to do. But if nothing else, let's just say you had 3 deals lined up for March and you had a big trip planned in March. We got a challenge. Who can help you with that, or what can you do ahead of time so that this doesn't all happen while you're gone and you lose these clients? So there's so much we can do with this information. And then the price point. Even if you only have a range, pick a number, because what's happening here is this is adding that up. So right now, I know your potential for this first quarter, oh, I'm sorry, your potential so far going into next year is 1.9 million. So at any given time throughout, and the reason I just stopped here, some of my clients might have 30 or 40 units, if you will, or transactions lined up in their pipeline. Imagine if you get to the place, and some of you may already have that, where you got 20, 30 people that you're nurturing. If you're relying on your memory, you're doomed. So keep them all in one place because people roll in, they roll out, so on and so forth. But this is active nurtures. And then the appointment date is the date at which you sit down with these people. And at the end of that appointment, you say something like, are you ready to put me to work? If the appointment does not end with something like, are you ready to put me to work? May I be your realtor? Are you ready to get started? Whatever your quote close is, if it doesn't end with that, it was not an appointment. You went and showed them houses, that's not an appointment. You talked to them and you said you're going to come back with a CMA, still wasn't an appointment yet. Unless at the end of the appointment they can sign a buyer's agreement or a seller's agreement, it was not an appointment. So you guys have heard me say this. If the appointment ends with something like, why don't you guys think it over and let me know what you decide? That is not an appointment. So don't kid yourself. And if you remember, part of the economic plan, that bottom line number, which was on the bottom line, which is how many appointments do I need each month? So we're tracking. How many did you have? So if you needed 3 appointments for the month of January, you actually had 5. Good for you. You're 2 ahead of the game. Okay. All right. And by the way, for Scott's someday buyer, he's got to repair his credit. One of our steps is to get an appointment with him. Right. Same with Betsy. Okay, I'm going to meet with her on the 31st. That's right. Okay, that's good. So I'm going to need to do what I need to do to prepare for that appointment. Now let's go, and this will also give you your average sales price based on where you project that you're going. So now let's go down to past appointments and leads. Well, once someone becomes a customer, meaning as a seller, you've listed their home, or as a buyer, you've got them under contract, then we're going to move them down here and we're going to add them to the sales volume. We'll come back to that in a minute, but we're going to move them down here and we're just going to say, hey, we converted them. We don't need any other information. For the people that we did not convert, the leads that we received and we didn't convert, we don't delete them, we move them down to the bottom. So let's say, for example, in this example, Sam and Susie, we converted them. So just moving them down, I'm going to add them to the sales volume. I don't need to change anything. This information down here is completely irrelevant. The only thing I really need to know is who were the people I converted and who were the ones I didn't, and where did those leads come from? And so if I didn't convert them, Nancy No Show, she just went MIA. She just stopped returning my calls, or I just couldn't find her, whatever. And Mark Mystery Man, he just I couldn't connect. It's okay. You're not going to connect. But if, for example, this was your business, by the end of the year, we can look at this bottom section and we know now what your lead conversion rate is because I have them all there. So when I asked you guys to determine your conversion rates on the economic plan, some of you had to make a guess about it. Well, if you use this consistently, you won't ever have to guess again. You'll know. So let me give you an example. I have a client that we just started working together a couple of months ago. We were looking at the conversion rate. It was about 50%. Well, that's far below the national average. So I said, well, let's just look. Now we're looking at a small snapshot, only 90 days so far. But I said, let's look at this. So we looked at all the ones that we converted, and then I sorted them by the ones that they didn't convert. I said, now I want you to go through the ones that you did not convert, and I want you to just think back to what you did or didn't do. And I want you to see if there's a pattern here. Then I want you to look at the ones you did convert, and I want you to see if there's a pattern there. Because if we can figure out what's working and what's not working, we can change it. So one of the things that this person determined was that the ones that they converted were, guess what? Sphere of influence. And they stayed in touch with them. Why? Because they knew them, or they knew somebody who knew them. So the connection was already stronger. The ones that they didn't convert, all but one of them was not a sphere of influence. So they were sign calls or they were open house. One was a for sale by owner. So they were skip scattered leads, which we know that the conversion rate on those is lower anyway. But the main kicker was they didn't stay in touch with that person because that person was not as responsive. And so they didn't feel like, in their words, chasing after them. When in actuality, because there wasn't a strong connection, they needed to chase after them if they wanted the opportunity. And one or two were crazy. So, okay, we don't want to convert those. So we were able to sit down and create a strategy around how are we going to stay in touch with them better is this, right? This up here, this top section. And so because this tool was new for them, I think in the future, their conversion rate is going to increase simply because somebody like me is asking them every week, when is that house going to be painted? And do you have a calendar reminder to reach out to them? Does that make sense? This is just a way to take a picture of your business and figure out what's working and what's not, okay? So let's go over to sales volume. Well, any questions about pipeline before I go over to the sales volume? No? Pretty simple, right? So I'm gonna go to the sales volume. And by the way, each year now you just duplicate this sheet and now it's sales volume 2025 and 2026 and so on and so forth. Some of my clients, we've been working together for 7-8 years. We can go back to 2016 and I know exactly what's happened every year. I have another tab that I add for my clients that's a year over year. It just kind of calculates that automatically. We can see whether their volume's up, whether their average sales price is up, and whether their commission percentage is up. And so we know what's their business looking like. I can look at somebody and I can tell you the year that they got married, the year that their mother was dying of cancer, the year that, they moved, whatever. We know exactly based on that year by year growth. And if it's not due to life, because as I recently heard a preacher say, life be lifing all the time. And that's okay, but we need to understand how the effects that it has on our business. And if it's us, we can make those changes. Okay, so here's the sales volume. Again, you're just copying over this information of the name, the type, and the source. Here's the list price. Let me freeze that. Here's the list price and the sale price. I've built in a ratio calculator. That's useful because at the end of the year, you can go back and look. You can sort by seller and you can see if you're able to get your sellers more than the average bear. If it's you sort by buyers and hopefully you're getting your buyers less than the average bear, right? You want to make sure you're doing those things, but this will calculate it. Here's your commission percentage. We talked about that in doing the economic plan. You can see based on the seller or buyer whether or not your commissions are up or down. This number is so valuable because anytime I see this start to tick below 2.75, we just do a little math. You guys heard me talk about this, and we just determine how much money they've left on the table, and then they get to go and tell their family how much money they've given away. And so anytime it starts ticking below that, we're looking to see when that listing goes on at 2.5, my question is why? And it's their business. It's not mine. It's your business. It's your business. But for most people I've found, it's because they feel like they have to do it because everyone's doing it. A lot of people are doing it. That's the way of the thing. If it's, this was a family situation and, they're moving out of state and this or that, whatever, like that's fine. But if you're not keeping an eye on what you're doing, my experience of 18 years now shows me that the reason people end up getting less than what they believe they should be getting is not because of any really good reason, but because they don't have the skill set to articulate what they're worth. Not because they're not delivering, but they just don't know how to articulate that. So anyway, that's something there. And then you've got your gross commission, how much you paid out. This will tell you how close you're getting to your cap if you're in a cap structure. What your net commission is. There's your address. There's the status, closed, active, pending. And then there's where you closed it. So all of this stuff is super helpful. It's going to track your average sales price, and all of those things. So you'll know in any given time what's coming up to be closed soon, what's already closed, where your active listings are, etc. And so a lot of people have the tendency to want to add a bunch of columns here, like what was the transaction fee or how much you paid your TC, or don't do all that. You don't need all that. All that's being tracked somewhere else with your broker. You don't complicate this thing. It won't be useful. Tony Robbins always says complexity is the enemy of execution. So keep it simple, sweetheart. The only thing I would say is if you have a very strong agent referral business, that you might want to add a column there for agent referrals. Like I have a client, she does a ton of business through agent referrals. We do track that separately. But ultimately, if that's not the case, I wouldn't worry about it. And then I just have a little section down here for things that are canceled, withdrawn, or expired. So just keep in mind if this is only for a deal that you lose it and you lose it forever, right? If you have a listing that's under contract and that thing falls out, it goes from pending, back to active, and just leave it there. If you have a buyer that falls out, they may go back to the pipeline because now you're back to the searching for the property thing for them. But this down here is for deals that truly are, you just lost the deal for whatever reason. It happens. One of the numbers on the economic model is what is your contract to close conversion ratio. You won't know that if you don't keep track of the ones that close. Okay, so that's that. That's fine. I get it. I know we're a little bit past time. Thank you. Thank you, Beth. But that's that tracking form. Any questions, any comments on that? I want to make sure that's clear for you guys so that you'll be able to use it, Any questions about anything that we talked about?
A lot of us have a whiteboard also in our offices that track this Well, actually, it's just pretty much the pipeline, I think.
Yeah.
Looking at mine is my pipeline.
Yes.
So it just feels like it's double work.
It is a duplication. That's correct.
But however, this is more solid. And like you said, we can go back to this and look at this later on.
That's right.
Um,
Because on your whiteboard, if it goes away, it just gets erased. So if I
right.
said, okay, go back to January and tell me your lead conversion rate, you couldn't do it if all you had was a whiteboard. So yeah, it is double work. But this is in perpetuity, right? So what I do with my clients is in January, we wipe this out at the bottom. Once we get the conversion rate, we wipe it out and start over. I have a couple of clients that can't ever let go of anything, so I just created another tab called really old leads. They can't let go of anything. So they got hundreds of leads, that they've stored up. But yeah, this is, and by the way, because I created this for myself, because I keep mine, if as an agent, I kept it in, I don't know that Google Drive was a thing back then, but I must have had something that could be used at, viewed in different places. Because the fact of the matter is, by keeping it in your Google Drive, you can access it from your phone, from your laptop, from your tablet, or whatever. You don't have to go back to the office to see what is the next step for Susan Sell right now, because you have it here. So, and yeah, for my clients, I mean, they need to report it to me. I can't see their whiteboard. But yes, as in essence, I do have some people, Marianne, that still have their whiteboard because the whole team is looking at that, you know?
Okay.
And then for my other teams, everyone has access to this, but they still need that visual in the office. So yes, they're doing double work, but I don't know. Is it a lot of work? I don't know.
No. Thank you. This was very informative
Yeah.
and very helpful.
Okay, good. Yes, Alice.
It was very helpful. So I'm trying to decide if I need to go back and update for this year so that I actually have the numbers going into January. So I think I will.
Well, if you have, if your volume this year's been, reasonable and you got 6 or 8 transactions to put in,
Mhm.
it's if you've
It
done
won't
all
take
your other
long.
stuff and you have 30 minutes to spare, then I
Mhm.
can go back and do it.
I'm
If,
going to.
yeah, okay.
Me
Just
too.
make sure it's after you've done all the other important stuff.
And I have everything calendarized to make sure I do that. And
Yeah.
the other thing is it's really important. Actually, I wrote down a note to add to my calendar that there's needs to be time to review this. This needs to be done
Every
because you
day.
tend to do it and then you tend to just forget about it. Oh, a month from now. Oh, you know what? I really need to update that spreadsheet.
Yeah. My clients look at their pipeline every single day.
Day. We
And
should up because we should be talking.
that's correct. And when when I have, my client's calendar link for their coaching call, in the notes section is a link directly to this form. So as soon as the phone rings and it's Alice's call, Angie Bell's clicking on this spreadsheet because it's front and center. Now, my client may tell me, look, today we're talking about my marriage because I'm about to bonk somebody in the head with a frying pan. Okay, that's fine. But it's on the screen. I'm looking at it. And if they say no, that today I really want to focus on on what I'm doing with my open houses, that's great. But 5 minutes before we end, we're just going to circle back and see how are we doing. Because, like, for example, let's say it is January and your goal for this year is, 8 million. Well, I could say we got 1.7 potentially here, 1.9 here. So that's a little less than 4. If your goal for the year is 8, you're on track. Don't freak out. We got plenty of time here. But every month, essentially we're doing a little math to see, are we tracking? Because maybe you thought you were just going to fiddle fart around this summer and you realize you're not halfway to your goal. Well, sorry, you're going to have to do some more work. Let's strategize. And then we get to fourth quarter, it's not a shock. Oh, I'm not going to meet my goals. No, And if you're not and you want to, we put together a fast track plan for what you're going to do in Q4 to make sure that you're not sitting around waiting on something else to happen. So, I think it's a valuable tool. It helped me as an agent, and it helps my clients, and I've been using it consistently, like I said, for about 15 years now. So hopefully that's helpful.
It is.
It is.
Awesome. All right. Anything else before I let you guys roll? Next week we'll my goal here, because it's 4. Next week I'm gonna pull out another little, maybe one of the growth laws just to remind us of. And then I want to dive into the P&L statement spreadsheet, and then we can take any other questions. So as you get through it, think about the economic plan, the lead gen plan, the budget plan, and the leverage plan. If there are any questions that come up or notes that you had from the clinic, I'll entertain those as well. Also, you could go in that Mighty Network and just type in any questions that come up over the week. I'd rather you put them there than send them to me directly, because then your question may be as I answer it there, it may benefit somebody else.
Mhm.
So
Sounds good.
that way,
Agreed.
that'd be super helpful. If you think of something throughout the week, you're like, boy, I'd really love to know more about this, pop it in there. Or if you have an insight, something that you're like, wow, I thought of this, this might be helpful for other people, share the wealth and pop it in there as well.
Awesome.
Thank you for taking
Angie.
All
the
right.
time to do this.
Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks.
You too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.